This is video 4.1. It is an overview of prepping a character mesh. Setting up the scene and basic navigation of tools for sculpting mode in Blender. The model on the left is the mesh sculpted after the first layer of subdivisions on multi-resolution modifier. On the right is level 1 subdivisions before the sculpt. I ran into some issues with corrupted mesh while in the multi-resolution mode, but I was able to save it. These are the base mesh. Left side base mesh has the high-resolution sculpted mesh coordinates applied to it. The right side is original base mesh. Let's get started. His lips on the inside, I am tidying it up and adding some more geometry so that it will hide the inside of his head and mouth bag. This is for when he opens his mouth wide. I don't want the viewers from outside to see into the inside texture of his face. Also, there needs to be an extra line or two of geometry to create some other face shapes. Under this menu in the viewport overlay is where I toggle the wireframe on and off, as well as where the 3D cursor and text info can be hidden by turning it off. Just adding a few extra edges to horn sockets ensure the form keeps its shape when subdividing. Same goes for the eye sockets. I'm too lazy to delete half his geometry and mirroring it and sewing him back up, so I will add the same edges manually on both sides of his mesh. Under Modifier, look up the Multi-Resolution tool. Hit that Subdivide button. Okay, let's check his poly count. On the bottom of the screen in the gray bar right, click to open up the menu. In the Status bar menu, select Scene Statistics to see the poly count. Now on the bottom right of the screen shows the stats. Currently I am in the UV editing menu, so the wireframe mesh shows lower poly version even though it is subdivided. The low poly version is acting like a cage that controls the higher polygons. I want to see the true subdivided, high-resolution mesh. Click on the Sculpting menu to see the subdivided poly versions. Toggle between the different resolutions simply by typing in the number. 0 being the base mesh. I am adding multiresolution modifier on his horns now. Just doing a preliminary check to see how the mesh deforms. Looks fine. Time to crank it up. Boom. Nicely done. See how areas such as the ears and under the eyes and lips are a lot more dense than say his muscles on his shoulders? It turned out how I have hoped for. Those high poly density areas are needed for details such as wrinkles and pitted skin, lumps and bumps. Also the base mesh needs enough geometry to help the normal maps look realistic and bake well. Areas such as back of head are low visibility, so I used a lot less geometry there and gave it a very small UV map space as well. When working on huge projects, always save often and keep duplicates of the same ongoing file. Nothing more demoralizing than having a fatal error crash and losing work or going off on a tangent on your model and having no way of backtracking. Often that can be prevented by not working on it past 1 a.m. Right now, I am going to do some fine-tuning of his face proportions. His eyes, something is off about them. The insides of his eyeballs are too small. It's making him look cross-eyed. Lots of small tweaks like this is attention to details that makes or breaks a model often. Obviously you knew that already. Here is the shader settings for him. Yuck, his eyeballs are crashing out of his sockets. This means the camera angle is too tight, causing the geometry to clip. Select camera icon and go under View tab. Oh, by the way, the eyedropper here can select the mesh you wish the camera to rotate around. This can be really handy so you don't lose your model when navigating around the scene. Just fiddle and tweak the clip distance. When you like the settings, go under Edit menu and save the scene preferences. I want to show you how to use the cursor tool for modeling and sculpting. Using this as the focal point for the camera helps with navigation and rotating around a focal spot. Sometimes when I am not using, it will turn it off as I find it distracting or might click on it by accident. This 3D cursor can be magnet to things for better accuracy. That is the little horseshoe icon on the top of the screen in the middle under my shading menu. Tap along the top of the screen. Most often, to center the camera around where I am working, I will select the vertices or faces and hit the period on the number pad on the keyboard. The camera will focus the rotational axis based on the center of the selection. On the top right corner is the scene collection. Here is a list of all the geometry assets and skeletons. Make sure to name the objects created to keep the scene organized. Each object can be hidden by unselecting the eye icon to the right of the column. The rotation and tools buttons can be hidden under this gizmos icon toolbar by toggling on and off or going into the menu and selecting specifics. The camera view lens angle can be adjusted by clicking on the camera icon and going into the View tab. The angle will distort how the model looks. The distance the model is relative to what angle you want to the final look. So be aware of that before you start modeling. I prefer to set mine at 110 for character modeling. To start sculpting. In object mode, select the mesh. Select the Sculpting tab. In the tool icon on the right, select Modifier and apply multi-resolution. Hit the Subdivide button. The resolution level is indicated with the number 0 being the base mesh. Just showing where the wireframe can be turned on and off. Mirror your sculpting can be turned on by clicking the X button beside the butterfly toolbox. To undo the last function is hotkey Ctrl+C on the keyboard. When pressing Ctrl button while sculpting would be reversing the tool brush in the opposing direction. To pull up the hotkey menus for the brushes in sculpting mode, press Shift plus spacebar. The toolbox will appear wherever your cursor is. But I find this hard to navigate with my Wacom pen and the hotkeys too all over the place for me. I think I prefer to manually click on the visual toolbar on left. As you can see, I have started sculpting his brow ridge first. For this model, I will do the sculpts in stages. Subdivision 1 will be just the basic flushing out of the detailed forms and finessing his likeness and silhouette. I am hoping to give him a slightly more edgier chiseled look than the reference. The next subdivision layer will be his folds and deep creviced large wrinkles. The last subdivision will pores and fine lines and texture feel. Hopefully the geometry count doesn't implode my computer. The rest of this video will be time-lapsed. Speed of the video can be slowed down in your YouTube screen under the little gear icon on the bottom right. Hope you are enjoying my process. Feel free to select some music from my playlist. Any questions, just ask in my comments section. I like to use the elastic deform brush to give it small nudges to break up the line flow a tad. This way it gives it more subtle irregularities that gives it a more natural feel. However, beware of overusing this tool as it is easy to go too extreme from the base mesh shape. While sculpting on the higher resolutions, the base mesh does not deform to the higher subdivisions mesh. But all higher mesh versions does follow the lower version's mesh before it. Take note. Apply base action is permanent. Ctrl-Z does not undo this. I will have to clean up the line flow a lot. I don't want to think about that. Onwards now. In the area between his temples and horns you might have noticed even in multi-resolution 1 there is lacking geometry for details, but I don't want to jump and subdivide it into the next level just yet. This is because at higher resolutions the mesh gets harder to manipulate in smooth manner and facial proportions become more challenging to alter with high-density mesh. If you want to make large changes to proportions and shapes, it's best to go to 0 base multi-resolution and alter it from there, and all the higher resolution versions will automatically follow its new base form. The main sculpt brush is hotkey V. I use it mainly to pull the mesh outwards. Press Ctrl while in this brush will push the mesh inwards. I like to use this smooth red brush, it respreads the mesh out. There are some tools in here such as pinch and crease and others. Be careful not to overuse it as it can cram and tangle up the mesh and make it hard to spread back out. The sculpting in here is not as refined and easy as ZBrush since there isn't layers or much reverting of history. Also, the brushes are more basic. The layout is very straightforward though in comparison, and it's free. What a great way to practice. Remember to save often and different versions as you sculpt. I was having some challenges with his lips, and I ended up just going back to older saved version. It's easy to get carried away in the details. It's best to be balanced in the progression of details. So I moved forward to other areas. By hovering over the borders and edges in the Blender boxes, it will show the slider arrows so you can adjust the box size. For maximum viewing, just slide it to hide away boxes. Under the Tools tab here in the Sculpt mode, the brushes can be fine-tuned in this menu. Also along the top, drop-down boxes. The sharpness and shape of the brush is adjusted in the fall-off. The key to sculpting in more detailed forms is in subtle strokes so the mesh doesn't get too distorted in one direction. That way there is less work that I will have to do when it comes to pushing the mesh back in the areas that are concaved. The tools all have hotkeys. To access the hotkeys, just hover over the brush type. A dialog box will pop up to show it. There is an ability to create your own hotkeys in QuickBox, but I rather keep it basic. His neck is wimpy in the reference images. I am making him more muscular in this area, as it seems more realistic that he would have a thicker back, neck and head muscles to support those horns. What fuckery is this? So, it seems there is random vertice added in, and the mesh is corrupted and not mirroring correctly. Even when I push the mesh back after saving it, the mesh will corrupt again and again. I collapsed the random vert, but that caused other parts of the mesh to corrupt on the higher poly version. I will have to apply the sculpt onto the base mesh and simplify the base mesh in the problem areas. I hope this works and not too much details are lost, since the higher mesh will have to get trashed. This is why I am working on the details of sculpts in 3 to 4 levels of multi-resolution versions. Some subtle details around the lips were lost, not a big deal. I will add those back in on the next level of detailing. I have exported the old original mesh as FBX and imported into this fixed version. You can see the differences of the two base meshes. The mesh on the left is the new fixed one. Looks pretty decent. However, the eyebrow topology is a hot mess. Oh well, I wasn't planning on eyebrow face shapes anyways. Ugh. Okay, next project, I want to make something fun and simple.